Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to macroeconomics. So we started in class today calculating GDP, but I want to give you a little bit more to understand how GDP is understood, because I just kind of showed you the calculations today in class, but there's more to it. So welcome. One of the things that we're going to start looking at is, instead of thinking about individual firms now and individual buyers and sellers and their decision making, we're going to look at the decision making of entire economies. Hence macro, we're talking big stuff here. So one of those things that we need to consider is GDP. Now, in class, I didn't give you the GDP definition other than to really say it tells us how much stuff we're producing. I gave you the nominal and the real, and we talked about how they're different. And so we talk more about the actual measuring part than the rest of this part. So final goods are really important here. So in another video, you're going to see me talk a little bit about the difference between final goods and intermediate goods. But in short, final goods are final goods. They're the last thing that you purchase. So when you buy shoes, for example, those count towards GDP. And those shoes include lots of other goods. They include leather, they include rubber, they include shoelaces. All of those components are part of the price that you pay for the good. And we don't count those goods until they are sold as part of that shoe. And the other thing is that these services, these goods, have to be produced within a country's borders. So just because, for example, we buy a shirt in America, if it says it is made in China, well, that is a good that does not count towards the United States GDP. In fact, it kind of brings our GDP down, as you'll see in a second. It counts towards China's GDP. So it depends where that good is produced as to whose GDP it's counted towards. Now, there are 4 components to GDP, and they are right here. This is the GDP formula, and hopefully you will come to understand it, and it'll just be like instinctual. C plus I plus G plus NX. And I'm going to talk about these 4 components that add up to GDP in just a second. But briefly, there are 2 ways to calculate GDP and to measure this. So essentially what we're doing is we're measuring all the final goods sold or produced in a country. You can do this in one of 2 ways. Well, you could measure how much your households spend on those goods. That would be your expenditure approach, right? Looking at how many dollars the households give to the firms. Or you could look at it another way, and you could see how much the firms give to the households in turn for those resources that they use to make those products. That would be the income approach. And the reality is they're the same number. I think in the book it uses the example of mowing a lawn. So if Susie pays Johnny $100 to mow the lawn, well, that $100 of spending is also the expense of mowing the lawn, so to think. I don't know. Just trust me on that. In your book, they talk about it and they make it a little bit. There's a couple other ways, like variations. The reality is, you just kind of need to know that either way you measure it, you're coming up with the same answer, because $1 into the firm is then $1 spent to the households to get those factors of production that you need. So that is helpful to kind of understand what exactly they're doing when they're calculating this. Now, if we go back to our 4 components, so the C stands for consumption. This is stuff that you buy on a daily basis. This could be shoes. This could be toilet paper. This could be movie tickets. And it represents the biggest part of GDP. These are things that regular people buy for their homes. So household spending here. Now, don't confuse household spending with investment spending, because these are goods that are more like a good to make more goods. What's a good that make more goods? How about like a hammer? Or you might call those capital goods. Capital goods. All right. And sometimes this might be spending a lot of times by companies. So they purchase things that will help them make more things. And those are considered investments. Now, one thing that is included in investments, they count structures here. So homes are included. So if you buy a house, every ounce of your being is going to want to say it's consumption, but it's actually investment. And I don't have any way to help you remember that other than the fact that structures are included in investment spending. Now, everybody hears investments and they want to say stocks, bonds, mutual funds. Those are not investments in the sense that when we are talking about investment spending, we want to get something, some productive good or service, hence here good or service, in return. But when we buy stocks, we're not getting a good or service, we're getting a piece of paper that says we own a part of a some entity. All right, so stocks not counted. All right. Your G stands for government purchases. So again, these have to be goods or services that are productive. So you know, salaries to like teachers or to like army generals. Those salaries are for services rendered, so those count. Buying tanks, sure, those count. Building roads, bridges, those are productive goods. Those are tangible goods. Those count. But people also quickly remember that, like, oh, what about like paying somebody to be on welfare or paying a retired person their Social Security benefits? Those are not counted. Those we have a name for them. They're called transfer payments, and they are not included. You are not doing you're not providing a service as a Social Security recipient. You're not providing a productive service to society in the same way that a teacher or an army general is. So they do not count. The last one is our NX, which is net exports. And it's the balance between the goods we ship out that are made here, and so those add to our GDP, and the imports that we bring in, which makes our GDP go down, and it just provides this countermeasure for the trading that a country incurs. Now, we in the U.S. are a negative net exporter, which means that we import more than we export. So earlier I talked about when we bring that shirt in from China, it helps to lower our GDP. Well, here's why. Because it's an import, and we import lots and lots of stuff, more than we export. So our net exports are actually negative. So there's your four components. You will know this formula inside and out by the end. Well, I don't want that. By the end of macro, it's everywhere that we go. Okay, so those are your four components. Now, there are going to be some things that are not counted. Like I told you, stocks and bonds and mutual funds not counted. You're going to see a video in a second that walks you through some other things that are not counted. It will help you do this worksheet to identify the things that are not counted. Some of these things you should already know. Oh, I think actually 11. I actually think I used that as an example already. So you're going to itemize these based on the category of GDP here. That will be your job. And I'll show you a couple of questions here that we're going to lead off with next class. All right, so these will probably show up on your entry assignment. So take a peek. And best of luck. Let me know if you have any trouble. Remember, we're using our journals. Yeah, let me know. And remember, it's a fresh start, so good luck and don't fall behind early. Have a great night, guys. Bye.